It's a cold December afternoon in Armenia, but the political temperature is rising in this part of the world, and with me is a very, very special guest, scientist, ambassador, businessman, prime minister, and now the president of Armenia. Welcome, sir. Welcome to Wion.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Armenia.
Thank you.
And I hope you'll find not only the cold outside, the rising temperature in political arena, but the warmth of Armenian people.
Thank you, sir. I hope to. Let's start with what's happening in your country. It's in the midst of a snap election. And in an interview in April this year, you said that democratic change is finally arriving in Armenia. But we've seen a lot of political upheaval, some say, a lot of political change. Do you believe that Armenia is on the right track?
Well, I do believe that Armenia is on the right track. And the change started in April last year, and amazingly, it started after my inauguration. You have to realize that in our country, what we are facing is not only one revolution, which has the name of being a velvet one, which is a great achievement by our nation. And I would emphasize by the nation, not only by individuals. Although individuals like the leader of the opposition, Mr. Pashinyan, had his own contribution of this revolution happening in a peaceful way. I would add also that the former president and the prime minister, Mr. Sarkissian, had his contribution choosing the path of resigning rather than confronting and creating a completely unnecessary and confrontational situation, which was very sensitive. And I'm happy that we passed that through, and the revolution, Armenian style or Armenian type of a revolution, now is quoted all over the world that you can have really revolutionary changes without bloodshed. We are facing another revolution as well, a revolution in brackets, because at the end of the day, Armenia for 27 years was a presidential republic. Before that, we were a part of Soviet Union, which was clearly presidential in a form that the power was very vertical from top down. And now we are changing the system to a parliamentary republic. And of course, the change is not simple. I would say it's also generational, or saying young, I don't mean by age, by spirit, by the way, the new thinking, a new way of looking at the events, a new way of governing as well. So you can be 60, 70, but still be very young. So for me, being young is not the number of years that you have accumulated, but how do you approach life? Are you really young by spirit? Are you looking forward?
You said that this was a revolution that was achieved without bloodshed, and some have said that this has at some level drawn inspiration from Gandhi's satyagraha, which was also a civil disobedience movement, which was also a movement of non-violence. Do you see parallels?
I don't know how much the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi had the influence, and the Indian experience had the influence on individuals on the street, the younger generation, but definitely it had the influence on me. So when I was offered to become president, that meant for me a complete change of my life, because I was a free man. Although I was representing Armenia as an ambassador to the court of St. James, but as an ambassador who was not paid a salary. In fact, I was someone that tried to contribute my diplomatic skills to the country, staying a free man. So leaving that aside for the next 7 years, becoming sort of, although the highest civil servant, but still a civil servant that you have to serve in special conditions, and you have to lose a big part of your freedom, starting from contacts with your family, because my family lives in different countries, and seeing less your grandchildren, enjoying less of your freedom of going to concerts in Salzburg or to opening of the Milano. I love classical music, and I love traveling a lot. So it's a complete change of your life. But then it's worth it because you serve your country. So the movement very quickly reached a level of very high confrontation, it was clear that the President of the Republic has to interfere. And this is where I think the whole figure of Gandhi was one of those figures that inspired me. And I went into the demonstrations, just into the crowd. And my first meetings with the leaders of the opposition and with the leader of the opposition, future Prime Minister Nicole Pashinyan, happened surrounded by probably 50 or 100,000 people there. And it was amazing when the President walked there, I think, because the movement was against the power, but I was greeted perfectly, nicely, positively, and people were supporting. They were first shocked seeing the President is walking the street and coming into the crowd. And then I had to take off my tie to become one of them, because I was the only guy around 100,000 that was wearing a tie. So you had to be one of them. You are no different, even if you are president. And now I think we can be proudly saying to the world, well, Armenians can do a revolution without bloodshed. So the answer is yes. Mahatma Gandhi had clear influence on my thinking and feeling as well. Now I come
to what happens next after a revolution.
So your second kind of, I think you can, walking the streets of Yerevan, you will feel that there is a very high expectation as usual when revolutions are happening. There's a lot of positive energy, and the biggest next challenge is not to betray the revolution. Betray in the sense that not to leave them as expectations. In the 21st century, because everything moves very fast, people would be expecting that the changes will happen. But they will be expecting not one change, but multiple of changes. The society being much more free. Then there'll be more justice in the society. Then there should not be corruption. So there should be a fight against corruption and institutions put in place that will keep the country free of corruption. Then democracy has to be developed further. And then, of course, very important, the economy has to start running much better, so the conditions of people should be improving. To achieve that whole spectrum in a short period of time will be a huge, huge challenge. And one of the ways of doing that is, again, the same. People. People have to believe that they are part of the solution, or they are the solution. So at the end of the day, in many ways, people get disillusioned when there's a high expectation, but high expectation towards the leadership or leader or organization or the government, saying, okay, we did the revolution, now it's your turn. And then in 6 months saying, why we're not living better? Again, coming to the same story. The Indian experience that you cannot make changes in India, which has 1 billion or more people, without engaging the society and just leaving the solutions to the governments or leaders. Engagement, participation is the key.
Indeed. You're in the midst of an election, and for someone coming from India, this is something that surprised me, because when a city or a state is in election mode in India, there is a distinct thrum, there's a vibe, there are posters, there are rallies, there are meetings. And then I was reading that in Armenia, most of this campaign has been done on Facebook Live. And I don't see very many posters of leaders. Had I not read the papers, I wouldn't have been able to tell that this is election season and in 24 hours people will be voting. But while it's incredible, at the same time, when the whole world is talking about fake news and social media and the influence that it can bring to bear on people and voters, is there a worry that for a new democracy, there may be forces operating from outside which may be beyond your control?
Fine, I'll try to 2 or 3 points. First of all, I think high respect for India, because you are the biggest democracy in the world, which is true.
It is true.
I think more than 1 billion people believe in democracy, and it doesn't matter, are they rich or poor. I think everybody believes that their vote matters. And the whole society is that because of the religion or religions in the country? Is that a national a sort of heritage? Difficult to judge. Probably it's a mixture of many things. But you are who you are, and people passionately believe in the importance of their participation. This is exactly what I was praising a couple of minutes ago, that our society has to participate. That's number one. Number two, today in Armenia is the day of silence. It's announced that the day before the election, nobody should rally. That's one of the reasons that the city is nice and calm, quiet. But nobody has stopped. The rules can be applied to the material world, but how do you do that with the virtual world? It's complicated. Point number three is that this revolution, they call it velvet, or I call it the revolution Armenian style, but it was 21st century sort of phenomena, because most of the things were happening on the virtual space, and people were getting their opinion on the Facebooks of this world or other platforms. The organization of revolution was done through the Facebook as well, new technology. And one of the reasons probably is that Armenia is not a very rich country in natural resources. Always hard work, and using your brain was the main thing, the main tool, the main advantage that we had. Armenians were always much more international. The Armenians were living in Mumbai, in Bombay, they were living in Calcutta, they were everywhere. And they were tradesmen.
They still are. Your diaspora is, what, 4 times bigger than your resident population?
Yes, it's still the same. We are still in India, we are still in Manila, we are still in Singapore, we are still in China. We were in Samarkand and Bukhara, we were in Manchester, in Lyon. So that's the nature of the people. And so what I'm trying to say is we are sort of advanced trading people for whom the sort of hard work and intellectual property is much more important than the physical one. So it's not amazing that Facebooks of this world and the tools of 21st century became very popular in Armenia very quickly. From that point of view, engagement of people, probably it's easier. But the rules of engagement are quite loose, because there are not many rules of engagement in the virtual world. And it creates a lot of challenges, the challenges of the fake news or managed news or controlled news and everything. But that's life. It's 21st century. Welcome to 21st century.
Staying with interference, how do your neighbors see this new assertiveness? Do you believe that Armenia will have to recalibrate its equation with the neighbors?
Current acting prime minister was leading. They had announced that there will be no change in our foreign policy, for example, which is natural. Russia is a natural ally of Armenia, not a natural ally which this partnership has not started 10 years ago or 100 years ago. We're good allies for centuries. I think were and will be in the future stable and good.
So how do you respond when a John Bolton comes and says, we are offering to sell American weapons to Armenia? How do you balance the two?
That's just an offer, but I think offering is one thing. I think tomorrow we can have other offers as well. But first of all, offer is an offer, and then you have to take the offer, and you have to pay for the offer. And I think you have to plan for the offer. So I leave that to the government to decide what sort of weapons they want to buy. But the reality is that Armenia is the only country that is and can become a bridge between East and West. Because we are a member of Eurasia Economic Union, we have very good relations with Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and for us it's a very important step forward, because at the end of the day, if you look at the local Armenian market as an economy, 3.5 million of a population is not an attractive market. There was even a joke on the Armenian radio. Armenian radio jokes were classical jokes coming from Soviet era. Mm-hmm. And basically one of the jokes saying, with the future development of Armenia, can you tell us how many people live in Armenia? And the answer is, together with India, we are 1 billion and 3.5 million. Always showing that we are bigger than.
You mentioned Angela Merkel. She has recently said that Russia creates instability in Eastern Europe, in these countries. And there were reports in 2016, I believe a lot of Armenians were not very happy with the way Moscow responded. They sell weapons to Azerbaijan, they sell weapons to Armenia. How does that work?
How does it work? It works exactly as you described. At the end of the day, I think forbidding this or that countries to be engaged in different economic interests, it's difficult. It's not only our region. I'm not in a position of commenting whatever Chancellor Merkel has said, but I do believe that there is a solution always, and that solution is dialogue. That solution is a simple quality that is important for human beings that comes also from India, tolerance and the respect to other people's opinions. I think what we are losing in the world now is that we're losing this culture of talking to each other, respecting each other, and trying to find a solution. Unfortunately, worldwide, I think we see that a lot of international institutions, agreements, or ethics of behavior are being broken. And from that point of view, whatever is happening in our region, be that in Syria, which is not very far from Armenia, be that in the Persian Gulf, or be that between Russia and Ukraine, is disturbing for us.
You mentioned Ukraine and Russia. Do you believe they're on the brink of war, or is this positioning at the moment?
Personally, I hope there'll be no war at all.
They're asking for NATO ships in the Black Sea.
I think asking, I hope that common sense, logic will eventually prevail. And this is what I'm trying to not only demonstrate, but also advocate in my political meetings with different leaders, that use common sense. There's a limit that beyond that, logic and common sense stop working, and then God help you and God help us.
Last year, we celebrated 25 years of diplomatic relationship between Armenia and India.
Yeah.
How do you describe this relationship and the potential it has?
Well, historically great. I think people don't realize that our history goes back not only a couple of centuries, but a couple of thousands of years. While traveling in India, I've seen a lot of evidences that our relations, trading relations, cultural relations, even language relations were deep, very deep. Armenian language is a unique language. It's a special branch on the tree of Indo-European languages. And if you go to try to do your research on the history of nations based on even languages, you'll find amazing discoveries. My son's name is Vartan. Do you know where it comes from? It's Verdan.
Oh.
Which means God's given. Am I right?
Yes, it is.
And it comes from old ancient Indian language, and it's Vartan. And Vartan is not only the name of my son, but it's also the name of a national hero saint that more than around 1,700 or around 700 years ago was leading Armenian troops against Persians. And that family, Mamikonian family, came from India. So there were Armenians that moving to India around 2,000 years ago and coming back again, and bringing also a lot of culture, including language culture. My family name is Sarkissian, and Sarkis family was based in Calcutta, then they moved to Hong Kong, then they moved to Singapore. And the famous hotel in Singapore that you go, it was founded by Sarkis family. So this takes us, our relations, very, very long history. I would advise you to visit Matenadaran, the Museum and Institute of Ancient Manuscript. You will find wonderful examples of Indian culture in the form of books and manuscripts. And of course, today is India and Armenia are sharing one thing. We both value the strength of a human. We're both, although India has some natural resources, it's a huge country, but your greatest treasure is your people. So it's the same with us. Although we are a bit small, but together with you, we are 1 billion and 15 million. And we share the same values at the end of the day, which is the power of a man. That's why when you go to Bangalore or you go to Hyderabad, you see these thousands and thousands boys and girls that are in the 21st century technology. And that's why you see, I think, the number of growing successful people in the world, a lot of them are Indian, because that's the 21st century. Natural resources will be less powerful, less important than the power of human innovation and creations. So we share a lot of things, and I think that we can do much more together with India. And it's not just the words of a politician. I know a lot of your businessmen very well, and we were discussing with some of your great business leaders about the possibilities that we can even share in the IT sector. For a simple reason, because India, your IT sector is massive.
Your thoughts on the current Indian leadership, Prime Minister Modi, and how he's engaging with the world?
Well, I think I have great respect. I think India has shown in recent years that it's different. I think the image of India outside India in the world is much more positive, much more dynamic and much more modern, and I think that's thanks to the activities of the Prime Minister. And I hope one day we'll meet and we'll have the discussions how we can improve our relations between Armenia and India. I have high respect for him.
Your book, it's called The Quantum Behavior of Global Risks. Tell me about it.
Well, it's not about my book, it's about the reality of the 21st century. Because the 21st century is going to be different. It's not only the risks are going to be different, quantum means it's not classical. Quantum means in the 21st century is going to be radically different than whatever we had in 20th century. Quantum means also that we are so much interlinked, interconnected, that things are happening instantly. Quantum also means that globalization it has gone beyond the red limit that it would be stopped. And globalization is moving from the sort of a macro globalization into the micro globalization. I do believe that we are in our evolution, which is not a revolution, but R, big, hyphen, and evolution with the big E, which means that we are in a rapid evolution era. So every year, every second year, every third year, there will be a revolution, and we have to adapt ourselves. Ideas, inspiration, direct access will prevail rather than political party, organization, system, and others. So we're going to live in a completely different world. President Macron and his revolution as well in France, he didn't have a party. He started with a movement in a short period of time and had got huge number of supporters. Even President
and he's
Trump,
struggling now.
But that's a different story. That means that's again another quantum behavior. People will be very much interlinked and interconnected, and their expectations will be today, not in 5 years' time. Today, tomorrow. I'll give you an example. I was in Samarkand, and I was the driver that driving me. He was reading on his smartphone something. I said, "What are you reading?" He said, "I'm reading Mr. Trump's Twitter." I said, "Wow, do you speak English?" I said, "No, it's translated into Russian." So the driver in an old ancient city from the Silk Road in Samarkand was reading what the President of the United States was saying today, now. And he was commenting on that. So how are you going to stop this in the world? And politicians have to adapt themselves, how they address that. India is one of the great countries that people are getting more and more access to communications. I mean, the plans and the programs I read about India and the government and the Prime Minister has and the industries have are phenomenal. I mean, they are going to be different than in the previous century. So welcome to the 21st century. Journalism will be different.
I hope they'll keep their jobs.
Well, of course, because at the end of the day, it's all about humans.
Yeah. So you've been a scientist, you've been an ambassador, you've co-created games like Tetris, you've led a country through a revolution. What next?
I didn't lead the country through a
You've been
guided the country. I made it clear. I tried to make it safe that the revolution happens in peaceful way. And what's the question? I'm elected for president for 7 years. So I have another 6 years of presidency. in this world that is behaving more and more quantumly. And I hope, because I really think about this world a lot, that I will understand where the world is heading and where will be the good place for my nation and my state. I hope that will be my place for the next 7 years.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for being with us here on this show.
Well, thank you very much. It was my pleasure.